Hey, how's it going? The name's Othor Ferguson, the Gothi of Heathen Wolfpack based in North Pole, Alaska. And today's going to be our first YouTube video, so this should be a pretty good one. Now we're going to talk about bloats, pretty much what they are, how to act in them, and how to properly host one too. And what could be a proper gift to the actual gods. Now, for those who don't know, this is a channel for heathens, or Norse pagans, or people who practice Ace of True. Now, with that being said, this could also be good for general knowledge for anyone who wants to learn about it. Now, first question is, what is a bloat? Well, a bloat is kind of a ritual, if you will. A ritual to give an offering to the gods. For example, a bloat to Odin, to Thor, to Freyr, and so on and so forth. Now, here's how it usually goes. Usually you have your opening, which means like you make the ground sacred of any sort. Being that you use a hammerite, a weestead, it varies on different people. Some people don't even do that at all. Because some people have some weird feeling swords, weesteads, and hammerites as well. But then the actual bloat itself. Now the bloat itself can be anything from an affirmation to the gods. So for example, a Gothi would have the horn poured out by either a Gotia or a female practitioner of any sort. They would grab the horn, and let's say it's a bloat to Odin. And of course they say, "Hail Odin, wielder of Gungnir, rider of Sleipnir, the one-eyed wanderer, the one who seeks all knowledge. It is you who we give this affirmation to, for you are the All-Father and the All-Wise. Hail the All-Father." And then you pour the meat into the offering bowl after everyone takes a sip, right? And essentially, if you have more than one god, you just go around the table doing such that ways, right? So it'd be, Odin, Thor, Freyr, whoever the offering is for. And different holidays, different rituals will have different deities, different spirits. It could be Lavatir, which means land spirits, or even your ancestors, things of that nature. And that's kind of the meat and potatoes of the actual whole bloat itself. And then, of course, afterwards, you do a symbol, right? A symbol mean, the best way to kind of do it is your hosts, your ghosts, and your boasts. Meaning, hosts being your gods. You give an affirmation to a god of your choice that is outside of one that was already given affirmation to. And of course, the ghosts being those who actually have passed. It could be an ancestor, it could be a good friend, it could be a sibling, it could be anyone who is dear to your heart or meant a lot to you that has passed away. And then your boasts being something good that happened to you during that time since the last bloat, or even just the year as a whole. So to go in order, pretty much it's a 3-step process, if you will. Your opening, your meat and potatoes, which mean the actual bloat itself, and then the symbol. Now, not everyone does the symbol, because symbols can be a little emotional. There can be a lot of turmoil that people are living through, a lot of trauma. And again, you're dealing with your ghosts, if you will. And essentially, that's pretty much a bloat. Now, bloats can vary in times in what they actually are. They can be pretty long, they can be pretty short. Like a summer solstice bloat, we do the actual 21 rounds. We have 21 deities that we actually give affirmations to. So that can actually take some time. And with that being said, it's actually a good thing to actually write these things down. Now, for example, there's nothing wrong with actually reading off a book of your own personal journal when it actually comes to any sort of these affirmations for any deity that you do. Especially ones you're not too familiar with. Because it can be perceived as a little disrespectful if you actually try to just shoot from the hip, if you will, or wing it from a deity you don't really know that well. So it's good to actually write these things down and do a little research on what deity you're doing an affirmation for. Especially some of the lesser known ones. So that's going to actually, you got to do your research, if you will. Because everyone knows Odin, everyone knows Thor, but not everyone knows, Sigurd, or, people who actually do Sigurd bloats, or not everyone knows Heimdall either, for those who actually really read too much in mythology as well. Now, let's say you were actually invited to a bloat, and you're still new to the heathen thing, Norse pagan, Ace, whatever you want to call it. And you're brand spanking new to this thing. Now, there's a 3 things you want to do, right? 1, be hospitable if you're being invited. Hospitality goes 2 ways. Don't mind the fire. The fire's uncontrolled. We're in Alaska. We're not worried too much about, fires and whatnot. At least not this time of year. So, hospitality. That is a 2-way street. As someone who is hosting a blot, You gotta be hospitable to those who come to your house. And then, of course, when you're going to someone else's house, be hospitable to them. You wouldn't go to your mom's house or your dad's house or any relative or friend you really love and disrespect their house, right? Because these people are going out of their way to actually bring the community together to actually host this at bloat, to give offering and admiration to the gods and stuff like that too, right? Number 2, bring some food. Maybe bring some actual libations for the actual offering itself. Unless certain bloats call for certain libations. For a Odin, Vili, and Ve bloat, you'd use cream or like a milk beer. That's what I like to use personally, as a milk beer. Cream of any sort. That's usually the more better ones to kind of go with. Those are more favored, if you will, depending on who you ask. Excuse me. But bring some sort of gift, food, side items, make it like a potluck, if you will. And if these people ask for a certain item, i.e. libations or certain types of items, feel free to bring them. And number 3, right? Thank your host, right? When it comes to this is a personal one for me, right? This is actually a big one on my part. Is when I'm not hosting a bloat and I'm going to some other kindred's bloat or blots, blot, whatever you want to call it, I make it a point to thank the host. To those who are actually hosting the actual event, whether it's a summer solstice, a winter solstice, Odin's bloat, whatever one it is, always give thanks to the actual host. Now, when would you do that? The symbol, the host, ghost, and boast. The host being, I like to thank the host for actually hosting this bloat. Simple as that. That goes a long ways. That actually helps you get re-invited back to some of the actual events too, right? It's, again, hospitality is a two-way street, right? So, be hospitable. Bring something to actually help out with the bloat, and actually offer your time to help out with the bloat if you have to. And thank your host. Those are like the big 3 for me, right? Now, there's more that you can actually do, but to me, those are the 3 big ones, right? Now, here's 3 things you shouldn't do, right? If you're being invited to a bloat. 1, don't talk about politics, right? Now, there's a couple of reasons why we don't talk about politics, right? Especially in mine. 1, a lot of us are military, so we can't really talk a whole lot about politics and stuff. Me, military myself, and having a YouTube channel and actually having social media and stuff like that too. I'm hosting soldiers and people in military and stuff, and they got to be apolitical. And our reason for that is because when you try to talk politics, a lot of people try to speak their side of the story and don't really understand how nuanced a lot of things are. But also, it's about honoring the gods and your ancestors. I view it kind of disrespectful, and this is a me thing. This is me. If you're actually coming to someone's house to talk politics on certain topics that really mean a lot to you, but of course don't really mean anything to someone else. However, if you're, for example, if it's kind of like sidebar conversations, like the little groups or whatever, and you're having like little small cliques or whatever, and you're kind of talking about like a topic at hand, and it could be politics, that's fine. But just when it comes to the bloat time, don't talk about politics. Don't bring politics into the picture. You actually can really send a bad message for it. Like leave the politics, leave the divisive stuff away from the bloats. And the reason being is because people are coming together to not only celebrate the gods, but the ancestors, but our way of life as a whole. We don't need more divisiveness. Because, you look at the world today, it's not exactly, a great place for unity and stuff. All right. Second thing. And this is kind of more towards people who've actually done this for a while, but it also could fall into the line of actually people who are still new to this as well. Don't tell people how to run a bloat, right? There is many ways to do bloats, to do affirmations, to do all these kind of things, right? Is be cognizant that there is many different ways to do such things, right? For example, if you follow the more Germanic way of heathenry, they have their own style of doing things, right? The Icelandic has their own style of doing things, Danish and so on and so forth, right? If you're a Norse pagan tends to be a little more freely, more eclectic, if you will. But Ace of True is kind of pretty straightforward. Vanitru, things of that nature, right? Now, and again, especially if you're new to this, don't be trying to dictate how things are done, because If you really don't know, then you just don't know. It's okay if you don't know. Don't pretend to know. Because, if there's one book that you should read before actually going to any bloats or whatever, is the Hofmal. Read the Hofmal, right? Because, Hofmal is the words of Odin, how we should act, hospitality-wise, and everything else of that nature. All right. All right, so what we got here? So we were at don't talk politics, don't tell people how to do the bloats. Oh yeah, the third one, things you shouldn't really do, right? Dude, if we're doing affirmation to gods, right? And it comes to the symbol, if you're hosting a bloat or you're being a bloat, and they allow any deity to come into the picture, right? Whether it's Norse pantheon or not, that's fine. You can do an affirmation for them. Now, if they are strictly of the Norse gods, don't make an affirmation to actual Zeus or even like Isis or things of that nature, right? Unless you have specific permission to do such things, right? And some heathen groups are really, really strict about these kind of things, right? Some are kind of, once the symbol kind of happens, you do what calls to you, right? And again, that's one of those things, like, it's best to ask first. Reason being is because if you don't know, it's good to ask. It's not going to hurt. It's not going to make you look stupid asking, is it okay if I venerate these gods at your actual thing? Now, one thing too is some people do allow Loki to be venerated at their actual bloats. Now, a lot of people do not. So if you kind of just go straight to Loki and these people don't allow it, it may not exactly be, well, it doesn't paint a good picture for you, right? So keep that in mind. So don't talk about politics. Don't tell people how to run a bloat. And don't bring deities that are not exactly welcome to the actual bloat, because some heathens really do not care for Loki or his children. Now, here's some actual things I want to talk about as far as like when it comes to bloats and stuff, right? Because the bloat is ritual. Ritual consent is a big thing, right? So, more often than not, bloats are usually just you offer mead or an alcoholic substance or just libations of any sort, right? Ritual consent is a big thing, right? So if you're a person who does not drink alcohol for, either you're, allergic to the hops or you're allergic to alcohol, or you're just someone who quit drinking, you have every right to not drink, right? So one thing I personally do whenever I host a bloat, I ask anyone who wants to have either their own cup, for those who are non-alcoholic or they are germaphobes, because that does happen, you can never be too safe, and they can actually make their own drink that way and go off of that. COVID, that was kind of a big thing, people having their own cups instead of sharing the same horn, and for safety reasons that makes sense. Another thing too is not every affirmation has to be alcohol, right? Or not every gift not every offering has to be alcohol, right? So I personally, and this is a good guide to kind of go off of, right? If alcohol is important to you, like you work for a living and then you actually like to give your best beer, a beer that is a favorite to you, and you give that as an offering, that says a lot about it. Instead of, like, if you like Sam Adams but you hate PBR and then you give PBR as an offering, what exactly does that say, right? But, for example, some people like to give water, some people like to give incense, some people like to make their own meat and do it that way. It has to be important to you, right? It's kind of a sacrifice. You sacrifice something that you value. For me, coffee's a big one. I love coffee, and I run off coffee and caffeine. So if you're like me and you have to start your morning off with a cup of coffee, a daily offering with coffee says a lot more than not, But here's the thing, though, too. One part of the Hofmal says is, it's better to give nothing than to give too much. So, if you have nothing really valuable to give, it's better not to give it. The gods are pretty forgiving on that. The gods understand that we're all humans. Hell, they made us. They made us who we are. They made us imperfect for a reason. They did that way. Now, one thing too, and I know this is probably going to happen up, right? topic of animal sacrifice, right? Now, if you look at the cult of Freyr and Freya and stuff like that, there is actual talk of like, the pig being very important to actual people who venerated Freyr and Freya. In animal sacrifice, how that would actually be done is, for example, let's say you have a pig, right? You raised this pig since it was about yay big, and then it comes to a big old hog, and of course you ritually sacrifice it for the gods, but you also eat that pig afterwards. There's a reason for it, right? There's a reason why you would actually eat the said pig, or why you give an offering via the pig. Now, that's not necessarily part of the bloat itself. However, if you feel you're uncomfortable and they're doing an animal sacrifice for any reason, it is more than okay for you to not want to be part of an animal sacrifice. And to be honest, there's really not really much of a need for animal sacrifice unless you're actually using that said animal to consume and make a feast out of that said animal, i.e. pigs, cows, things of that nature, right? So keep those things in mind. Sacrificing an animal is not a requirement. I'm going to turn this thing off. I know it's going to probably driving some of y'all bonkers. All right, well, I'm just going to hold this up right here because we can actually get more light. But with that being said, all right. Well, with that being said, though, right? Ritual consent is a big thing. Ritual consent, understanding what is being happening in the actual bloat itself. When you come to a bloat, you should absolutely know what is happening as said bloat. And again, most bloats, pretty much 99% of them are literally, they do a cleansing of the ground, if you will, via like hemorrhoid or weested, whatever the flavor is. And then they actually do the bloats itself, usually via drink, or even food sometimes, like Samhain. Food is actually a big one. You make a dish for the ancestors. And then you do a symbol afterwards if the host actually wishes to do that. But those are just some things, right? Now, I'm going to turn it over to people who wish to host a bloat, right? So here's some three big things for ones who host a bloat. 1, hospitality. Hey, we kind of talked about this earlier, didn't we? Now, hospitality. Hospitality is a two-way street. It is definitely a two-way street. If you want to build a community, heathen, North Pagan, whatever you want to call it, you got to be hospitable. You got to be nice to people, even the ones you don't like. But you also don't have to tolerate bullcrap either, right? So if, for example, you open up your home to the community, if you will, you open up to your friends, family to actually host a bloat of sorts, and you have someone who's being disrespectful, racism, or just being obnoxious, disrespecting your guests, things of that nature, you have every right to boot that person out of your bloat. And if you're that person at a bloat acting that way, that host has every right to boot you out of that bloat too. So one of the things I like to do when it comes to hosting a bloat is when people start coming up to the actual door, I personally greet them. That's a me thing, right? I personally greet them, say, how you doing? Hope the drive was safe, Hey, here's where everyone's at, and kind of like, hey, let's make yourself at home, take a coat, all that good things like that. And of course, and the big thing too, hospitality, right? Now, another thing for those who actually are hosting a bloat, number 2, timelines. There is a thing, such thing as called pagan time. Now, there's some people who actually have some pretty hard timelines, right? People who actually, have kids in daycare, or they have certain things to go, places to do, things of that nature, right? You don't necessarily have to have like a hard schedule, like at 8 p.m. people walk to the door, at 8:15 bloat start. You don't have to do anything like that, right? Pagan time. You gotta let pagan time do its thing, right? But also you have to kind of like let, control pagan time a little bit, right? What I mean by that is let things happen naturally, but if you have to push some things a certain direction, you might have to do that too, right? Because when it comes to bloats, I like to have a dinner. I like to host a dinner. I like to bring people in and actually make it a social event, right? Because we don't need to actually just make an event where just everyone just does the bloats and then they just leave, right? We're building a community. You're building people who actually want to be a part of something bigger than themselves, right? So be a little neighborly, right? So, one being hospitality, because I cannot stress that one enough. I cannot stress hospitality enough. You'd be surprised how many people are not as hospitable as they claim to be. 2, timelines, right? And again, taking time, but we can kind of push things along if we have to, right? But don't be forceful about it. Don't be forceful about it. Like, let people meander, let people kind of socialize and kind of just get to know each other, things like that, right? You don't necessarily have to like force people to like each other, like, you know, 2 rabid dogs or something like that. But, and I guess the third one's another big important one, and it kind of ties back to hospitality. Ritual consent. Yes, ritual consent is a big thing, right? And again, if people do not want to drink alcohol, do not force them to drink alcohol. Because here's one thing too, and I'm going to go back to the Hofmann about that. If you read the Hofmann, Odin very much talks about why you should control your alcohol. Why you need to actually drink in moderation, or just don't drink at all if you have to. Because some people are recovering alcoholics, and you know what? I do not need them to fall back into that spot because, you know, they feel that unless they give alcohol, that is not a good offering to the gods. I think that's crap. So for non-alcoholic options, cider is usually a pretty good one. Coffee is a fantastic one, right? You know, non-alcoholic mead, they do exist. There's ways to make it too as well. But there's nothing wrong with practicing sober. There's nothing wrong with sober heathens whatsoever. Actually, I think it should be more encouraged, if you ask me. Now, and here's another topic as well, and this goes for both people who are attending and hosting, right? One of the things too is don't be bashing other religions. And here's why I say that. And this goes back to hospitality, right? Again, I'm going to harp on this in all my videos, I swear. For example, not everyone who goes to blots are heathen, Norse pagan, ace true, any of those things. Now, the reason being, because some of these family members are supporting their loved ones who actually are Norse pagan, heathen, ace true, whatever you want to call it. And some of these people are Christian. Some people are atheists. Some people are Satanists. Some people are Islamic and things of that nature, right? I mean, it's one thing to have your fair critiques on said things. And yes, every pagan, heathen, all of them has a bone to pick with Christianity. And history would kind of more or less justify that. However, you can't exactly be bashing family members for supporting their actual family members actually partaking in said bloat and events. So, with that being said, it says a lot whenever you have a spouse or your family, you have members come to your actual community and their spouses come to support them. The last thing you want to do is not make them feel welcome because they're Christian or Islamic or any of those sorts of things. So, things of that nature. And again, you know, this community needs all the support it could get. So, and it's kind of just the running down, nitty gritty, dirty, and all that stuff too, right? But one thing I do want to actually harp on, and again, not only just hospitality, but offerings that mean something to you, right? Do not give away something that doesn't mean anything to you, right? That doesn't mean you have to give away like your most prized possession of any sort, right? Like you don't have to give your life away or do blood sacrifice. Actually, ritual consent again. Ritual consent. We're going back to that. If someone just randomly says, yeah, we're going to do blood offerings. If you don't feel like cutting yourself for an offering, don't do it. Do not do it. Your ancestors are not going to look at you any less if you do not want to give blood. Now, is there a certain ritual that involves that? Yes, it's a warrior marking ceremony, but that's a whole different thing. If you don't know it, don't do it. Because you have to have certain titles and certain people to actually partake in that. So if some Gothi or some seed Kona or some seed Mater or even some Skalds, self-proclaimed Skald, or any people who have self-proclaimed titles, which most people say self-proclaimed titles anyways, try to doing a blood offering or blood oathing, run. And again, I'm going to harp back on the animal sacrifice thing too. And the reason why is because, hurt things. But when animal sacrifices is not required, it is remotely not even required. The only time that would even remotely be required is if you want to sacrifice, say, a pig to Freyr, but you plan to consume said animal. That's the only time you should do it. And that's it. You know, it shouldn't be a daily thing. It shouldn't be, you should be just grabbing a little bird and just stabbing it just for, because you feel like it. That's not the way to go. So I really hope you all learned a lot through this video. And again, we all got to learn this stuff together. We all got to come together, take part in bloats, take part in ritual, be good to each other. Be hospitable. Be hospitable. But, as always, I am your Gothi, Othor Feierson of Heathen Wolfpack. And as always, stay heathen.